Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a review for The Last of Us Season 2, the second season of HBO's series adapting The Last of Us video games from Naughty Dog and PlayStation. So, I will give kind of like a general review. As somebody who's played both games, I'm going to be coming at it from that perspective. And kind of doing a lot of comparisons because the games are something that I feel like very passionate about. So the way that it's adapted is kind of how I'm looking at it instead of maybe just as its own thing. But the first thing that I'll say, my overall thoughts about season two, is that it is a far cry from the quality of season one, and in my opinion, a terrible adaptation of the source material of part two. That waters down the violence not only from the game that it's adapting, but also um, watered down from season one, which actually had a lot harder hitting violence, in my opinion. And I would say that season two also makes unnecessary changes that become out of character for even some of the characters that we did meet in season one. But even like some character changes from the way that they're portrayed in the story of part two versus here in season two of the show. Um, but obviously, the biggest thing is the show itself, how the characters from season one to season two, it is very different, which is kind of weird to me. Um, I feel like overall, season two seems unsure of what it wants to do and the way it wants to present some of these characters and aspects of the story from part two, the source material. Um, I feel like it doesn't really commit to telling the story in any particular way, and it kind of feels like they're doing two things at the same time that are conflicting with one another. Um, and just something off the bat, this season is only 7 episodes, whereas season one was nine. And to me, that just doesn't make sense for it to be like that, especially because season two is adapting part two, the video game, which was more than double the length of the first video game. So we should have gotten more, not less, in season two. And if they were gonna make part two, the game, into multiple seasons of the show, they should have front loaded it where season two was more, and then depending on how much more story they had of the game to tell, then they could have made season three a little bit shorter and however long they plan on going, because they said it might not even just be 2 seasons but 3 seasons for part two, which in my opinion is like unnecessary as well. I think you could easily adapt part two the game into 2 seasons, which I think makes sense to break it up. Otherwise it would just be like a really long season, which is fine, but with the type of budget that HBO is working with and the like length of each episode, um, it does make sense to split it at least into two. Um, Now, I don't want to be completely negative about it because, especially the first time watching through season two, I did enjoy myself overall. And the good parts of season two definitely soar. They are really good. But the problem is that there's only really two parts that like really match the quality of season one, and that's like, a huge drop, and you know, but no show wants that. So in that sense, they did kind of fail, I think, going from season one into season two. Um, and then I'll just give you a score right away out of 10, um, just so you know kind of how I feel, and then I'll tell you why. So I would give season two of the show 7 out of 10. And the first section I'm going to talk about, still no spoilers, is the story. And I would say that the story is unsure of what it, if it wants to be a revenge tale or primarily a romance between Ellie and the new character of Dina, who actually kind of steals the show this season. And that was never a problem in the game. So that's kind of why I think the game was just a lot cleaner in its execution than the show was. The show kind of seems to really focus on that romance, whereas the game, it was definitely part of it, but it was more so kind of like the light and the darkness that is The Last of Us Part 2. And I'll go into that a little bit more when I get to the themes. But for now, I'm going to talk about the characters, beginning with Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey, because Ellie does take the lead as the primary protagonist this season, where it was kind of a co-protagonist situation in season one with her and Pedro Pascal's Joel Miller. Ellie this season is oddly portrayed as being kind of stupid, and she's supposed to be 5 years older than she was at the end of the first season. Um, but to me, like, that's not how teenagers really work. They don't get more stupid. They might be like kind of cocky, but they really kind of portrayed Ellie as being stupid, and she was never portrayed that way in season one. So that she's one of the characters, well, the primary character that I was talking about, of like the character doesn't seem like the same character, and like they kind of uh, mischaracterize Ellie even from her portrayal in season one. Another big part of the show this season was that they watered down her violence. Similarly, also from her violence in season one, where she was capable of doing some pretty violent things, and she was like kind of drawn to violence in an interesting way in season one. Here, she doesn't go nearly as hard, in my opinion, as she did in the first season, and especially as she did in the video game version of the story. Um, and they set that up very well, actually, like to make her really be that violent in season two. In that first season, like they laid everything out, so it's weird that they didn't really follow through with that in season two. Um, the next character who, like I said, stole the show and is kind of the new co-protagonist this season is Dina, played by Isabela Merced, and she's a lovable, intelligent sweetheart who's best friends with Ellie and can also get gritty when needed. And she was a great addition to the show, and I'm excited and hopeful that we will see more of her in season three and beyond if they make it that far. And then Jesse is the third kind of part of their trio in Jackson. He's played by young Mazino, and he's a fellow cohort of the Jackson community who, like I said, is in Ellie's friend group. And he ends up assisting her on her journey to Seattle as she takes on the Washington Liberation Front in season two, who, different from season one, actually are like the primary antagonists, whereas season one it was just this journey and there's just different things in the way. Here there's like actual antagonists in the story. And then now Joel, the previous co-protagonist from season one, played by Pedro Pascal, is similarly to Ellie, is kind of portrayed differently this season, where he to me seems a lot softer and kind of more relaxed than he was in season one, where he was a little bit more uptight and like untrusting of anybody other than the people that he already knew. Um, I would say this season, episode six, is the episode where Joel, and actually the season in general, shines the most. Um, there's another character that is kind of involved with Joel that was an addition to the show that wasn't part of the game, and that's the character of Gail, played by Catherine O'Hara. And she is his therapist in Jackson, and she did a really good job, and I liked their dynamic with each other in the show. I thought that was kind of a really cool mini story that they added to the adaptation of part two. And then Tommy, played by Gabriel Luna, is a badass this season, and he's like the heart of the Jackson community and the leading muscle behind it. Whereas Maria, his wife, is kind of more the brains. Um, but I would say they kind of front loaded the season with Tommy, and he's used very well in Jackson, but then kind of underused in the season as a whole. Um, and his stuff in Jackson was really good, but I did kind of want and expect to see more that we just didn't get afterward. Now Maria, played by Rutina Wesley, her relationship with Tommy was done really well this season. I think we did get to see a lot more of their relationship than we did in the single episode of season one, where we were introduced to both of them. Well, outside of the prologue with Tommy, especially in episode two, and you definitely feel that love for each other, and they do feel like a real couple. So I thought all that stuff was good. But Maria isn't really as fleshed out as of a character as Tommy is, and it's more so about her relationship with Tommy. Um, Now Abby is a new character that is very important, and she is actually the co-protagonist of the video game. But here she's played by Kaitlyn Dever, and she's only pretty much just kind of introduced this season, but she's not yet fully fleshed out as her own character. And she has ties to season one. But I feel like her portrayal in the small scenes that we got to see of her this season was kind of all over the place. When it comes to her presentation, and honestly the way that they have used her character so far was one of my least favorite things about season two. um and she's an interesting character in the game, so it's not like just the character herself, it's the way that they presented the character in this adaptation of the second game that I don't think it worked really well. And it's kind of one of the things that I was talking to you about like how the show doesn't really commit to telling the story in a particular way, and Abby's a kind of symptom of that. There's another character that's kind of aligned with Abby named Isaac, but we don't actually ever see them have scenes together in this season. But Isaac is played by Jeffrey Wright, and he's the leader of the WLF, the Washington Liberation Front, that, like I said, are the main antagonists of the season. And that's the group that Abby is a part of. Um, and Isaac in season two was used in a cool way, but he's more a tease at what's to come in season three as we kind of dive deeper into Abby's side of things. And he wasn't really a necessary part of the show this season, but anything that he did in the season, any scenes that they did give him were all really good, and I think done well. But it was kind of more of like I said, kind of set up for season three. Now the last few characters are Abby's crew, which I'm kind of just gonna group together because just like Abby herself, we don't really get to see each one that much, and even less so than we see Abby, I think. But overall, as like a little kind of unit, they were decent. So far, just like in the game, the one that seems the most interesting to me is Manny, who was my favorite and kind of the only one that I liked from that group in the game. But none of them are fully fleshed out characters this season. Um, Owen seems kind of more chill than he did in the game, but I don't have like any other feelings beyond that about him. Mel seems less chill than she was in the game, and honestly, kind of annoying. Nora is the one kind of thing that I think definitely, for so far for me at least, has actually kind of better than she was in the game. She's a lot kind of cooler, and like even she has a kind of different hairstyle, where in the game she had like a little bit thicker hair, like longer, where here she's like clean shaven and also has piercings, where which I don't think she had. So cause she they kind of added some style to her a little bit in the TV adaptation of her. That kind of just makes her cooler, I think. Manny is definitely a different take, I think, from the way that I kind of saw him in the game. But in my opinion, he's equally cool, just in a different way or for different reasons. And I'm really excited to see more of him in season three. So now I'm going to talk about the themes, which are kind of the big kind of draw of the game of Last of Us Part 2. And I would say that in season two, they continued the season one theme of love, but different from the game, it kind of focuses on that aspect a little bit more, like I previously kind of mentioned. And maybe that's intentional because it is a show, so it should kind of feel like the same thing. So maybe that's why they brought some more of those elements into it and like kind of focused on it a little bit harder. But because the story is so different from the story of season one, I feel like they should have kind of kept it a little bit more in line with the game, which focuses on hate. And the game is all about hate and the lengths that one is willing to go for their hate. And the show doesn't really commit to that theme. It is part of it, but it doesn't go all the way. And I think that's where the show definitely suffers in season two. Another theme that is in this season is parenthood, and that's also, I guess, kind of something that they continued on from season one. But I think because of Joel and Ellie's relationship, where they've been together now for 5 years with kind of that parent-child dynamic, it is kind of more prevalent, I think, this season. And we see that primarily through Joel, but we find out in season one that Tommy is also going to become a dad, and then now is a dad of a child of for 5 years. And I feel like they could have and should have done more with Tommy as a parent, but they don't just kind of don't really do anything with it really. And Tommy's son isn't even really a character; he's just a kid in on screen a couple of times, but we don't really get to see too much of that, which I think was kind of unfortunate. The last kind of theme that I could really think of that was prevalent this season is loyalty, and we see that through Ellie, her loyalty to Joel. We see it Jesse, his loyalty to Jackson as a community. We see Dina's loyalty to Ellie as a friend and eventual lover. And then we see Abby's crew as a unit with their kind of loyalty kind of dynamics where and because we don't get that much of them, we don't see much of it, but we kind of like hear about it through Isaac's side of the story and anything we see with him because we find out, well, I guess I won't go into spoilers about that, but Abby's crew didn't start with the Washington Liberation Front. They started elsewhere, and they when they moved just kind of stuck together. So we see that kind of play out through there, and that's something that I think they're definitely going to expand on in season three. Now, the last section I want to mention before I get into the nitty gritty of the season is the action, which I think was a pretty big part of season one, um, mainly with the infected. And here, um, in season two, they had some great infected action, especially in the first half of the show. Like the standouts are episode two and four, and then there's like one sequence in episode five that was really cool. Um, but in my opinion, the game had this whole kind of war backdrop in Seattle that they could have utilized more in the show, and I feel like it was lacking some of that true gritty warfare um, that I feel like should have been part of it, and it just kind of wasn't. So I did kind of feel like in that sense it was lacking, but all the infected stuff was really good, and maybe even the best that it's been in the show in general. So that stuff was cool, and if you like that stuff in season one, I think you would enjoy at least that part of season two. But that was never kind of the draw for The Last of Us, for me at least. And I feel like the actual stuff that is important is where they kind of failed in season two. So now, if you don't want to know any of the spoilers and you just kind of want to know my general thoughts, I would go give the show a watch. I do think if you like season one, you should definitely watch season two, and watch it through to the end.